It is so wonderful to be here today. Let's dive in. Sometimes it seems like when we look at the vehicle of assessment, we find a driverless car. Not only do we not see a driver, we also don't see a map with a clear destination. It's time to let all drivers of assessment be guided by a mutually agreed upon roadmap. It's not easy, but it is definitely worth it. When I was preparing to give this presentation, I just really became aware yet again of what a huge topic assessment is. As I tried to focus in, I actually found it became bigger and more questions and answers came to mind. I realized that I really wanted to unpack the context with you today. So together, let's ponder and muddle through the idea of learning, what we want, and what we actually provide our kids. And please grab pencil and paper. I'd love to have you jot down. We'll take little pauses for you to reflect and put some of your ideas down so that you're also engaged in this. And then in the question and answer, you have more perspectives to share so that we can really have a rich conversation. I'm Maureen O'Shaughnessy, a mom, school founder, author. I'm passionate for school change and determined to come at it from as many angles as possible until all learners have equitable access to real world, meaningful, interest driven, engaged learning. Whew. So let's start by looking at learning as a system. Grab a piece of paper. I encourage you right now to jot down some ideas. What do you see as the big picture for learning? Feel free to jot some of these ideas and share them in the chat box. Why do we even have school besides a place to care for kids? It's not for the assembly line preparing kids for an industrial era anymore. So what do you see as the big picture? I am going to unpack 3 challenges and possible solutions for each of those as a way of looking at this system. I don't know about you, but this image reminds me of family road trips with the 5 kids, mom and dad in the front of our beige station wagon, and my mom trying to give my dad directions, and he was pretty resistant to that. And she couldn't say left or right. She would have to say, turn your way, turn my way, because he would kind of get it messed up. But how we get this right is really hard. And we would benefit as we start to look at assessment in the research questions, the 5 W's and H. And wouldn't it be great if we had these questions answered about the learning each child does in each class, if we got that intentional and that granular? And if there were many ways intentionally planned that we could respond to each of these. Many of our teens, and my micro school included, ask why. They want to understand why they're doing what they're doing. When will I ever use this as they're studying advanced math? Wouldn't it be great if we all had a roadmap that we all understood and believed in, both horizontal throughout the year and vertical through the whole K-12 experience? Right now, I see 3 problems that keep us from getting that clarity. The first is at the macro level. Whose vision is driving us? How does it impact what we assess? I don't think we have a clarity on this. I think a lot of times teachers are just told, teach this curriculum. But if we could get clear at this macro piece, it could really inform the regular piece and the micro piece. Sometimes I feel like it's that old computer phrase, garbage in, garbage out, or confusion in, confusion out. And if we ask someone at your school district, what are your graduate outcomes? What is your school hoping their learning will lead to? Take a minute, and why don't you write down what you think your school would say, and what you would say should be graduate outcomes. What do we want when we hand those seniors their diplomas and say, ladies and gentlemen, presenting the graduated class of 2022? Do you think that the stated goals that a school has are the same as the actual goal? In your particular school system, does it feel like all of the stakeholders have a voice in the outcomes and in this roadmap? Does this decision making around outcomes feel like it's dynamic and alive? These are questions that we ask when I have served as the head of accrediting teams. We talk to the different stakeholders and ask, what's your vision, your mission? Who's had a voice in this? When was it last updated? Does it guide your school? These are really important if they're taken seriously. Unfortunately, competing demands, non-academic needs, lack of equity and access for all. There are so many other things that make this not a very tidy roadmap. Problem 2. This isn't macro or micro, it's kind of right in the middle. What type of learning are we assessing? Do our teachers have a choice? Are they trained in this variety? And do they use the ones that are most appropriate for the situation? Socratic, inquiry-based, textbook-driven, project-based, real-world community-based, state test-driven, competency-based. Who is choosing the learning goals? Who is choosing the learning models? As an overseas school director in international schools, I saw this whole range. I would get teachers from around the world that were joining our schools and wanted this opportunity to be abroad and to get to travel and get to be a part of the global network. I remember a teacher from California coming in and being really lost because in his district, he was told everybody in 4th grade needs to be on this page of math on this date in the calendar. He had no flexibility. And so when we took that away and gave him more ownership, we had to scaffold and give him a lot of support. And then we had teachers from Australia that were like, oh my gosh, project-based, hands-on, got this cool stuff going. My daughter was in a 5th grade class with Mr. Stevenson from Australia, and wow, it was so dynamic. And I don't know, their teacher training, he was an example of very well trained and able to differentiate. So the range between this California teacher and this Australian teacher, boy, there was everything in between. And then I wonder, in terms of drivers, how often do our youth have a voice, not only in what they learn, but in how they demonstrate competency? Is it always paper and pencil? Can they suggest, hey, how about if I create this? Or could I do this oral instead of written? Do they have a voice? The third problem is at the micro level. What type of assessing are we doing? I really like understanding by design's reverse engineering. They start with the essential question guiding the unit. And we're working on that in my school right now. We're having our PD days after the students left last week. So in professional development, we're really getting the essential questions unpacked for the first quarter and sharing them with each other. So US history is looking at immigration, and our Spanish teacher's like, hey, I want to tie in some vocabulary and some themes that work with that. So that essential question can be such a rich way to start, especially since it's not a right and wrong, and it's definitely beyond multiple choice. It's a question that a kindergarten kid could answer, a 10th grader could answer, a post-grad student could answer at very different levels. So it's about conversation, not a right and wrong answer. And then after the assessment is determined, how will the students demonstrate increased knowledge or increased skills? I love that UBD doesn't get to what lesson am I teaching until the final step, so that they're really thinking essential question and how will I assess? And that's so nice, because I've been in places where teachers are like, oh, I love doing this unit on teddy bears or on colonization. It's like, but wait, where are you going? What does it tie into? So reverse engineering is super powerful. Do many of our teachers have this opportunity to select an essential question, meaningful assessment models, especially with all of the constraints on them right now? I don't know. These are some of the questions that people are asking and some of the comments I hear. And I really appreciate getting to work with a lot of innovators in our Ed Active Collective. We meet quarterly and we're moving forward with a lot of different voices informing educational change. And at our collective summit at the end of April, we had big picture learning in there, and we had flipped classrooms. So both of these were letting students reach mastery before they moved on. And if they demonstrated mastery early, they could move on more. And big picture learning, it's like, hey, here's this theme. Are you going to approach it from the English or the social studies, or there was just so much student voice, and that made it relevant. And I have to say the phrase postmortem comes up quite a bit. When we just do summative assessment, it feels like, as they say in medical terminology, a postmortem. It's after the unit is dead. You're taking it apart and giving kids a grade, but it doesn't inform anything because they're on to their next semester, their next teacher. So while summative has a purpose, it really isn't going to inform teaching or learning. So it should only have a limited purpose. So I want to look at some of the solutions that are out there. And this is just kind of the tip of the iceberg. The first thing we really need is to create a common roadmap. And this needs to hear from various voices, informing this roadmap. We need to hear from the employer and colleges, both of whom have been saying, you're not sending us graduates that are work ready or that are college ready most of the time these days. So they have some big concerns. We need to hear from parents. What do you wish? What do you want that graduating senior to go out and do, or be able to apply, and maybe by age 25 to be able to demonstrate? Let's hear from the students, the teachers. I wonder what students would say. What do you think? Take a minute to write down. What do you think students would want to be able to do and be able to be when they graduate? What do you think is important to them? My guess is they care deeply and have a lot to tell us. They want to be happy. They want to be productive. They want to get a future that plays to their strengths and their passions. They're invested, unless the system has told them otherwise, told them you don't have a voice, what you're interested in doesn't matter, sit down, be quiet, open your textbook. Our students really have a lot to tell us, and I think sometimes that's a stakeholder that we really don't attend to. I have an example of an amazing roadmap I want to share with you. It's super fun on my podcast to get to talk to people that are doing a phenomenal job. So Edgecombe County Public Schools, it's rural, and a high percentage of Black students, and they brought their stakeholders together in an intensive process. And they know that 18 kids need to get some life experience. So they weren't saying, hey, when my kid graduates, they need to be this. But they're saying, hey, give them a little time to put it all together, maybe to do college, maybe to have some work experience, some internships. And then they say, let's come back at 25 and see, will our kids say this? and they get to the heart of the matter. When I listen to Education Reimagined, that is like the gold standard for rethinking education, big picture learning, our lead prep, we talk about people knowing their purpose, their passion, living it. And ikigai is the phrase used in Japanese, where it's this energy where you jump out of bed, ready to do what's yours to do that day. And it contributes to longevity. These people in Okinawa have a life expectancy beyond anybody else in the world, and they attribute it to ikigai. It's super important that we get to do what we're passionate about. And I have daughters in their 20s, and they say, gosh, my friend got this degree and now they're just working to pay off student loans, and it's like in a cubicle and they're not happy. And my daughter, my younger daughter, luckily was fortunate to do community college dual enrollment and go to a 4-year for her last 2 years and graduate with no debt. So she was thinking, maybe I want to do graduate school. And she's like, nah, I'm going to go back overseas and I am going to work in a nonprofit for street children in Chile. And it doesn't pay anything, but I'll just get some ESL jobs and I will teach enough English to pay rent. She had the power to choose her next step and to align with her passion. And we should make that happen for all of our learners. How about global awareness and agency? Do these kids have a voice? And can they be like Greta Thunberg and say, I believe in environmental issues and I get it at the world level and I'm going to do something about it? Do they have a way to engage productively in their community? Can they be a power, be a voice, use their energy, use their deep concern for the state of our world right now? And resilience. What are we doing right now in our schools that help kids be resilient? Edgecombe County had a fifth goal that said, do my graduates know that they can come back to this rural community? And I didn't put that in here because it was really specific to them. But this is an example of a roadmap that all stakeholders created together. It's dynamic, it's live, and it really guides the decisions that they make. Powerful work.
Recording in progress.
The second part of it at just the medium level, what do we want? Can we make some agreements on learning that is relevant to these lifelong outcomes? So we know that we need a variety of kinds of learning. We know that it can't just be multiple choice. It can't just be true and false. So if we go back to that first outcome that Edgecombe County has, I know my purpose and what I'm passionate about, and I'm living it. I'd love to have you take a moment and jot down ways our schools could help learners meet this graduate aim: purpose, passion, and I get to live it. And now I want to throw in another layer to this. I've been fortunate to have Dr. Kristen Miller on my podcast a couple of times, and she's from the With Heart Project. She has done amazing doctoral work on ACEs, on childhood trauma, and she's, as a 7th grade math teacher, she actually took the first, I think it was the first quarter of each math class and really addressed, how can I help my students feel safe and how can I help them feel a part of the community? And this is totally action research. She was in the trenches doing it. And she got better 7th grade math results than all of the teachers that were using the full period to cover math. And then what she had gotten previously when she just taught straight math. When she took time to address the other parts of the brain, that, am I safe? Is it okay for me to be myself here? Do I feel like I belong? Learning happened. And she's a huge proponent that we screen for ACEs, that we understand every year what our kids are coming in with and how we can support them. There's a lot of research out there that says if a kid perhaps was homeless in their preschool years or witnessed domestic violence, that it can actually impact their high school attendance 10, 12 years later. So these things are all connected. So what types of learning experiences, what types of community building experiences, what types of human needs do we need to be met? This is complex. There are many layers here. And if we just say, open your textbooks, turn to this page, we're dealing with robots. We're not dealing with humans that come to us with so many different backgrounds and so many different gifts. Solution 3. This goes back to understanding by design, reverse engineering. What is the assessment? How will I know if kids have learned what this is about? And does this assessment have input from the students? There's so many different kinds of assessment. How can we get intentional? And back to that passion and purpose, how would we know if our youth know their purposes and what they're passionate about and are on the way toward living it? Using formative assessment to evaluate our teaching as much as students' learning is a big part of the answer. We have to be willing to let rigor be redefined to higher level thinking and creating. If you go to Scandinavia, a lot of schools there don't believe in hours of homework after school. They want their kids to be well-rounded. Their kids do great. They take a lot of the pressure off. And we know most likely to succeed, this wonderful documentary that High Tech High created, they did research, and this rigor that we talk about, oh my gosh, my kid's taking 3 AP classes. The kids that max the AP in the spring, when they're reassessed the following November, fail it. It was short-term memory for a test. How does that get us back to purposes and passions and living it? Is that really what we want rigor to be, that they can do well on a test in that moment? Or do we want them to walk away with more knowledge and skills and a direction that aligns with their strengths? And what if kids helped design the rubrics and the projects and the learning goals? I kind of think it'd be cool if we had as a rule that kids can use their smartphones on every test. I think that would totally take us away from what do they have in their memory. I appreciate in grad school, I had to take statistics, and it's not my favorite area. The prof let us use our notes and write out all of the formulas. We didn't have to memorize anything. And in class, we'd get up there on the chalkboards in those days and write out how to apply it and when, and do all the steps, and everybody would help everybody else out. So we had to know how to use the tools, but we didn't have to memorize tools that are right there in a book. Why do we make kids memorize? Isn't it about how they access and use the information that's available? There's a lot of rethinking that we need to be doing. So many more aspects and ideas. Here are a few I would like to suggest that you think about. Perhaps you could listen in to Aileen Bennett in our Ed Active Collective or on my podcast and learn more about Education Reimagined. They are all about learning 24/7 in the community, partnerships, relationships. They've just come out with the big idea, and they are a representative of a variety of stakeholders that came together to create this vision for learners. They have a newsletter. You could sign up for that. Or look on my podcast at A for Arizona. This nonprofit took a lot of school leaders from around Arizona and some that are from really poor, really rural, and said, what are your issues? And at a grassroots level, they said, oh, okay, this is our biggest common issue. Then they worked with the state legislators. In this time where there's so much bipartisanship, they got the legislators to get rid of seat time. And now they've got a transportation new legislation where kids can get transfer an Uber to that gifted school across town to create more access. And they have micro grants that can help if you have an idea. And I got to serve on their grant committee. If you want to help foster kids and create this and this and this, or if you want to take a van on Saturdays into this Latino trailer park population and educate the parents and have STEM project for the kids, so many cool ideas. Maybe you want to explore looping in your school district, that the third grade teacher stays and is the fourth grade teacher, or that the humanities teachers, English and social studies, work together and they have ninth graders and then 10th graders, or they have multi-age. Maybe you want to look at flipping your classroom and having a mini lecture as the homework in advance, and the teacher coaching kids and working on competency-based mastery in the classroom. Maybe you want to look at place-based learning and what does your place, if it's rural, if it's urban, what resources and how do you connect with your community? There's definitely stuff out there, and I get excited as I listen to my podcast guests and the folks on EdActive, but you all need to commit. How will you make learning and assessment relevant for our learners? It isn't going to happen without each of us. We all need to be in agreement. We have to put it together. We, the stakeholders, have to invest in a regular process to create and revise the graduate aims for our youth. We have to measure what we teach and provide benchmarks so kids can see the growth. We have to let rigor become about deep dives and higher level thinking. And we have to assess in a formative manner. Are we helping youth move toward graduate aims? Do we check back and hear how our youth are doing after high school graduation? How can we meet our aim more fully every year? We've got to pull these three components together and work as a team. I really appreciate your time, and I'm super excited to get to go into the questions and answers now, because I truly believe we can have a clear roadmap with real-world assessment measuring our progress. So this resource page has some ideas from the EdActive Spring Summit and Education Reimagined. One final reflection for you. Please jot down, what action step will you take this week to help our learners have this needed direction? Thank you. Let's shift to questions and answers. And conversations.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you, Maureen, and thank you everybody for your comments during all that. I'll just quote Roberto at the end that got a thumbs up from Ali. These ideas sound more engaging than much of what is happening in many of our schools. I think I'd echo that exactly, and I think also I would echo the fact that that's true around the world. Can I thank Maureen and invite any questions that people might have from some of the issues that she raised. And while you have a chance to think of that and answer her last question as well, perhaps I can take the first bat, if I may, Maureen, and let's talk about formative assessment, if I may, because I think this is absolutely one of the critical issues that we have at the moment. The way it's used, the way it's understood. What can we do to improve the understanding of how we can use formative assessment, both in the classroom and beyond that?
So I think we have to first take some pressure off of the teachers to cover content, Because if they're racing to get through a whole textbook, and who says what's in the textbook is even what we believe in? I mean, in the United States, there are a couple of states that crank out the textbooks, and it ties into their perspective in their state. And some of that I don't really want my kids buying into, because I don't think it's as factual as it needs to be. So if we can take the pressure off of the teachers to cover all of this, and if we can give them a chance to really understand formative, because I think some teachers experienced summative assessment. Okay, end of each chapter, we have this test, and on to the next. Now we have the semester exam, the year-end final. I don't know that some teachers ever got out of the system that they experienced growing up to understand that formative, we're actually doing it, and we can do it more. Formative is when you're walking around the class and seeing, hey, this kid gets it. I'm going to say, hey, you've got this. Let's have you do this challenge instead. Or, whoa, this kid doesn't have it and doesn't have the foundational pieces. I need to back up and review long division. And what do you do with that remainder before this kid can move on? So if we can acknowledge where teachers are using it and then elevate it and say, this is actually the powerful form of assessment that lets each kid have a chance to go at their pace and have learning really stick. So we have to help teachers see what it is, what it isn't, give them examples of where they're doing it, and a chance to work together with others, because there are teachers in every building that have formative assessment down, and they have peer teaching, and they have writers workshops. They have so much going on that's really engaging. They also are the ones that aren't lecturing in front, so they have time to be the coach and be out and about. So I think it's an awareness, and then I think it's a conversation. I love when teachers can go observe other teachers. Hey, during my prep,
Yeah.
can I come in? I heard you're really good at this. Can I come in and see how you do this? And then can we talk about it after school today? We have to stop being these silos and shutting our doors and being in isolation. I did that as a teacher, and it was kind of scary as a young teacher that, wow, I'm 21 and they're trusting me with these 32 sixth graders, and the principal will come in once or twice a year. It's like, gulp, so there's so many ways we can help increase the understanding, and a lot of them are organic and giving teachers time together and time to collaborate.
What would be your message to school leaders?
I would tell them they're doing a great job juggling so many conflicting expectations, and challenge them. What would happen if you were less focused on state tests and summative? Would you ever find, like Kristen Miller, that when you put more time into caring for the kids, making them safe, making them create community, that you actually get higher results? Would you be willing to try something like that to see if investing in the human can actually get you the academic goals and results that you're hoping for?
So how about I love the idea about teachers observing other teachers, with all the sorts of internal politics that that involves, and some staff rooms it works, some it doesn't. But I do love that. But maybe what we need is almost to timetable free time for teachers to go to other classrooms and see them in operation.
Absolutely. As a young teacher, my second year, I got ripped and moved to a different district and went from sixth grade to kindergarten. It was like, oh my gosh. And the principal said, I believe in you. I want you here. I love what you've done with language-based, and I'm putting my daughter in your kindergarten class. And it was like, oh, but that was such a whole language at the time. That was a really important concept school. And he's like, hey, go check out Barry in the first grade class. He is a master at all this. It was it was a huge relief and affirmation to know I could go to other teachers that had more experience in primary, see what they're doing, and it affirmed, hey, I'm doing this okay. And it gave me a ton of ideas. Oh, I could do this, I could do that. We need to, as a school, say, we believe in this. Find somebody that's doing something you're interested in and get in there and learn from them, and they can learn from you.
Good, excellent. I'm still looking at some more questions from from our audience. And while we go through that, I'm going to go back to something you said about college ready versus work ready.
Mhm.
I have a view that there's actually a third ready into that, and that's life ready. And there's a lot of activity outside of education and outside of the work experience, which is still part of the growing, developing, I say education in inverted commas, learning environment. And I'm quite keen on this idea that we should be preparing kids, if I may call them kids. My apologies to anybody who doesn't like the expression, but the students, preparing them for managing their life in some way.
Mhm. I completely agree. And I think when we empower them in the school system to, one, get to focus on their passions and purpose
Mm.
and have a sense of direction, to get them out doing internships, to let them be a questioning part of the education process, then they're going to keep questioning. They're going to say, hey, this works for me, this doesn't. They're going to have that self-awareness and take it into what they want to do in the future. They're not going to be afraid to say, hey, I don't know how to do my first rent lease. Who can I talk to understand? Do I need a cosigner? What does that mean? As they're dealing with life, or, hey, I have college roommates that are jerks and they're not cleaning up, and what do I do? They're going to know that I get to be a part of this. I'm not this powerless being that's been, my daughter used to say it was academic bulimia, that they just opened up her head and dumped in stuff and she was supposed to spit it back out again. If kids are a part of the educational process the whole way through the K-12 system, they're going to go out and say, hey, I need to talk to my resident advisor in this dorm and understand this more. They're going to feel like they have access to people that have answers. They're safe asking questions, and that they have the right to ask and to get more information and to make their own choices. So when we empower them all the way through the system, they'll go on and be empowered adults and keep finding what they need to find. But if they're widgets going through a system, they've never had a sense that I matter, my questions matter, I can ask for what I need, I know who I am, this works for me, this doesn't work for me. So there's so much we can do effectively with this formative assessment, with passion-based learning, with giving kids more agency in the school system, that's going to launch them as empowered young adults that have those life skills and can keep getting them.
I know it's quite interesting. You may gather, for those of you that can see me, that I have a few years under the bonnet, under the hood. When I was at school, it was still very much an environment where people assumed that you would have a job or a career or a profession for life. The truth of the matter is, I think any kid going through school, any student going through school at the moment, is looking at a world where they will go through many iterations of jobs and careers, professions, occupations. I think that's maybe not a new pressure, but I think that's a fairly recent pressure that we have to somehow prepare students for the environment of change, quite fundamental change. By the way, I've gone through about 6 different professions and occupations on my passport over the years, I think I embrace change. I'm not sure we're preparing the younger generation to embrace change, and I think we need to. Any thoughts?
Absolutely. And again, I'm going to lean on somebody that's an expert and is doing this, because we don't have to reinvent the wheel every step of the way. So Stan Litow has P-Tech, and this is an 9th grade through 14th grade program. Obama has talked about it. The French Prime Minister has talked about it. Every Dallas high school has this school within a school. And what he's said is, I want to help kids be prepared for what's next in their life. And I want business to team with us, and I want them in the classroom in 9th grade algebra, helping that kid. And this breaks down a lot of barriers because it's not necessarily a college ready kid. It may be a kid that's way behind. I want business people in there helping them see, here's why you use it. Here are some future uses of that. And the students in his program get free community college. And what they end up with when they graduate from high school, sometimes they have a whole associate's degree, but they have a skill set that they can use while they're going to college. So instead of flipping burgers, it's like, hey, you've taken some medical assistant classes, or you've taken some coding. You can have this kind of a job. Maybe you're going a totally different direction in college. You can experience this. But if we give kids some skills so they can get out and try a profession, maybe while they're in college going a different direction, they start to see, oh, I could do this or this. And we don't know. College kids, I'm like you, Jeff, I'm older, and they're all kids to me in their teens or early 20s. But they change their minds in college. It's like, oh, I didn't know what anthropology was. Oh, I didn't know, because I'm so good with math and stuff, I didn't know what an actuary was. We need to expose them. They need to know their strengths, and then they need to see what's out there so they can try and adjust and have support the whole way. So I'm with you. They need to know that it's not one and done. Just because I've stayed in education my whole career, I don't expect my daughters to have one career.
Yeah, unfortunately, Maureen, sadly, the clock is against us, but I'm going to throw in one comment that's come through, which is about the alignment of standards, the alignment of assessment, the alignment of curriculum, of requirements on students and on teachers to deliver. Any last thoughts on that subject about how we achieve a better alignment?
You know, it to me felt like I was rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic when I was in public school, and I started a school within a school, and we were doing more project-based. I chose to start my own micro school so that we were private, so we didn't have to deal with state tests. Sometimes you have to start something new, but otherwise it would be like A for Arizona. You have to have grassroots, you have to have top down, you have to have the stakeholders together agreeing on those common aims and working it together. It can't be top down, but grassroots up, they don't have necessarily all of the information. We all have to work together, and it's hard and it takes time. Yeah,
it's a challenge, but we presented you with a challenge to give our keynote today, and you rose to that challenge absolutely brilliantly. And lots and lots for us to think about and to discuss, and hopefully during the course of the day, some of those issues that you've raised will come out. Hopefully we'll get a feel and a consensus around that. I'm sure we will. So many thanks, Maureen.